Now, that's ahead of the meeting. The meeting's wrapped up today already of the central bank. Financial experts have advised the Apex Bank against increasing interest rates, that it will worsen the current state of the economy and it will affect asset quality of banks through an increase in non-performing loans and deposit money banks. With me on the show to talk more about this and the expected figures, I have the group Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Assets Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Mr. Chukwu, thank you so much for your time. It's good to have you continue our discussion. But first, I want to ask you, what is your expectation considering where inflation sits at the moment? It's a big elephant in the cupboard. And the central bank has for once told us that it will continue to increase MPR to rein inflation. But at this point, what are the fundamentals surrounding this decision?
Thank you, Tony, for having me. Interestingly, this is an unusual time, particularly for the monetary authorities, because their decisions are not going to be purely shaped by macroeconomic factors. But if we are to dwell solely on the macroeconomic factors, we are seeing the local currency depreciate, which simply means you have to tighten. We've seen inflation, as reported by Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, move to 22.79%, which also is an indication that you should tighten. But on the converse, we're also seeing purchasing power decline. We have seen household expenditure decline. So we are likely going to see a contraction in economic activities. So these are actually contradicting economic tendencies or economic forces. So ordinarily, if the monetary authorities are to focus solely on monetary policies or monetary parameters, yes, monetary parameters, the appropriate thing that they would have tightened, because if you tighten, you are able to slow down inflation rate, though interestingly, inflation is not driven by consumer credit. And then at the minimum, you will also be able to curtail the demand for Forex. But we also know that this demand for Forex is driven by other factors. Those factors include panic that has set into the system because of the consistent depreciation of the local currency. So, and again, another factor which I say these are unusual factors, or unusual period for monetary authorities. One of the major determining factors for the Monetary Policy Committee to make their call will be the direction of the executive arm of government. And we know that the executive arm of government has indicated through the president's inaugural broadcast that they are going to emphasize or focus on the real sector economic activities. And they will not likely, if you read the lines, not focus on issues around managing inflation. So the priority will be to create liquidity or make credit available to the real sector of the economy so that they can resume productive activities. So if that becomes an overwhelming or the underpin that form the decision of the committee, they are likely going to hold rates at current levels.
Rates at current level. Let's look at the implications now for the banking sector and Nigerians in general, who have to pay more for PMS. I found this on the web for if you need. Hello, Mr. Johnson, can you hear me? To make it develop the sixth. Can you hear me, Mr. Johnson Chukwu?
Yeah, I was wondering because I didn't hear you after I finished speaking.
Oh, okay. So I'm asking, I said, with this development, if they hold on to the rates, what will be the implication for the financial sector and for Nigerians?
Well, the implication would be that the current trajectory will continue. One is that we have seen decline in deposit rates. We're seeing decline in interest rates. Decline in interest rates driven largely by the fact that we're having a lot of liquidity in the banking system from the release of cash reserve, from injections coming from the higher exchange rate used to convert foreign exchange earnings from crude oil sales, and then the savings from subsidy removal. So this is injecting liquidity into the system. We're going to see that liquidity continue. So you're going to see interest rate drop further. And what that means is that people will move away from placing their money on fixed income and continue to invest in equities. So we're going to see a lot more active capital flowing into the equities market. As it relates to macroeconomic variables, like I said earlier, one, the inflationary pressure is not driven by excess liquidity. It's driven by supply bottleneck, supply shortfall, a sort of food crisis or insecurity in the major food base of the country. And until that is addressed, you're not going to resolve that. They added to the fact that we've seen fuel price become market reflective. So we've seen higher price of cost of energy, cost of transportation, which have all flushed into consumer price index. So these factors are not driven by excess liquidity, which really cannot be curtailed by constraining or contracting with the monetary policies. So we should continue to see the current trend. Then what then is required to be done is that we need fiscal intervention. We need to use fiscal tools to manage the current variables. One, to stimulate these sector economic activities or to stimulate production. Two, to reduce the level of liquidity in the banking system. And then three is to bring down what you call import-induced inflation. And import-induced inflation is coming from petroleum products beyond any other product. So these are elements or interventions that can only come from the fiscal authorities.
Interesting stuff. Let's take it up from there. And we've also seen NEC come up with, well, initiatives, to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. The cash transfer thing is what I want us to talk about now, looking at the new register and all of that. And many still say this might be the way to go. It's just that it's being done appropriately, properly monitored, transparently, and of course enough of accountability. We can get the figures and know where these monies are going to. Also, trying to introduce CNG-powered vehicles, maybe for mass transit and all of that. What do you think this would help address in cushioning the effect of these negatives at the moment?
Well, one of the things we always say that anything is better than nothing. In terms of conditional cash transfer, that is some of the state government want to be doing. One, in the first place, the state government wants to localize the register for the most vulnerable in the society. So they want to compile the register themselves and make sure they own it. Yeah, that's good on its own because ordinary register should be built from bottom up, which means you start from community level to local government level to state levels. And if that is the case, each community will know those who are extremely poor in their community. Each district will know those who are extremely poor in their district. So if the compilation goes through a transparent and objective method, we may have a more reliable poverty register. But of course, we also know that this is a political dispensation. And then a lot of the politicians may want to populate that register with people who are political jobbers, who they want to keep in their payrolls. That's the greatest challenge we have. So for me, the key thing is we must create some transparency around that. Good technology has availed us of a lot of transparency tools. If each of the states can upload their poverty register on the web and then break it down or segment it into districts, communities, local governments, and then with that, with the phone numbers, people can validate or verify this poverty register and then determine whether actually those who are poor are the beneficiaries. And there must be a way of addressing instances where the register has been abused. And in terms of other intervention methods that schemes that the government has come up with, you mentioned the issue of CNG. One of the things that make more advanced countries more stable and more secure is that they have ways of taking or insulating the most vulnerable from the oscillation that happen in the economy or the vagaries of the economy. One of those two methods of insulating the extremely poor is managing the transport cost, making sure the transport cost is not subject to variations. If you go to a place like England, you realize that you can buy your bus tickets months ahead, and you can buy your train tickets a month ahead. It's not likely, even whatever the inflation figure is within those localities, that they will increase the bus fare or the train fares at short notice. And even the most elderly are also provided free transportation. The other thing is food security. Most countries make sure that food prices are at the lowest level and remain stable over a long period of time, so that even no matter how poor your family is, they can actually feed themselves. So what is missing is that we don't have those social safety nets, the structure that protect the society. And if we talk of the CNG, it is a good idea, but I also know that the government had initially planned as part of the palliative to remove the subsidy to bring in 1,000 buses distribute a minimum 20 buses per state capital, and then other major cities to also benefit from those buses. Those buses are supposed to be public transport vehicles that would have charged lower transport fares, and the intention was to make sure you saturate the cities so that people do not have to also suffer this spike in transport costs, particularly when they are commuting around, which is what happens elsewhere in the world. The other thing I had mentioned is we need to make sure that people can access food. If people are well fed and can move around, then they do not so much feel the changes in price of fuel, the changes in inflationary figures.
Well, wrapping up this interview now, I'd like us to stay with the agricultural developments in the agricultural space. We see government stepping firm in that space. Distribution of grains to be done, opening up the agricultural sector, food items and all of that, trying to address the challenge of food security. We know what is happening with food inflation. We've seen the figure, even last month, the last figures we got from the NBS. So what do you think about these interventions? What are the positives in it?
Okay, what I think intervention that the government is doing now are in nature, in the sense that after the government, there's no food additional food production of those, the government will run out of those grains. So the core of the issue that we need to address it, and then we also need to provide basic infrastructure facilities in the rural areas, so that migration from the rural areas to the urban area will reduce. But most importantly, we need to fight this issue of insecurity in the northeast, northwest, and north central, which are the food base of the country. If we address the issue of insecurity and farmers can go back to their farms and produce, well, we have the capacity to feed our country and maintain food security in the country. And then you also make sure that they have basic infrastructure. I talk of road transport infrastructure that can evacuate those food items from where they are produced to where the large population of the people are living in the urban areas. We need to talk of irrigation that will make sure they have all year farming, These are structures that the government needs to put in place. Until we have those issues, any intervention will be sporadic. If you release grains from the silos, you need to replace those grains. The grains will only come if you produce or unless you have to import. So we need to do the fundamental challenge, deal with some fundamental issue that is constraining food production in the country.
I must thank you so much for your time, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. It's always a pleasure having you join us on the program. Chief Executive Officer, Cowrie Assets Management Limited. Do enjoy the rest of your day and have a productive one. All right, there.